The Doom Train. A 25I-NBOMe and Salvia Divinorum trip report by M. Posted to earwid.org March 8, 2018. Well into a pretty heavy 25I-NBOMe trip, I decided to take a teensy, tiny little hit of 25x Salvia that was bestowed upon me through some fortune. Exhaling, I laid back and felt all the oncomings of this. Immediately I noticed the intense, sharp geometric and orderly visuals of the N-bomb beginning to morph and round off at the edges, becoming more animated, organic and fluid, and went much further in depth. There was a real life and meaning to it now, aside from pretty colours and shapes. Along with this, I felt the presence of someone, or more than one maybe. Some unseen hand unfolding and revealing various pages of this reality for me. It was like a circus joker figure-esque thing, in the corners of my perception, manipulating the world in front of me, turning the pages. I started feeling I was in a great festival of life in all the universe. From out of the corners of my perception, I felt the warm company of others dancing, morphing and frolicking around me. There was a very feminine presence to it all. The soul of womanly things surrounding me, welcoming me to this world. I giggled and felt joyous. I sat in this experience not feeling too out of place, as otherworldly as it all seemed. Slowly, the salvia wore off and I was back into my N-bomb world. Now, the N-bomb world didn't seem so intense or deep as I'd thought, compared to this little taste of salvia world. I just had my first trip within a trip. Then, I decided to take a normal hit and hold it in for a good time. Now, I don't know what I was expecting, but this was beyond anything I've ever thought possible as a state of being. Being conscious and witnessing what I did will forever have a lasting impact on my life. So this is my interpretation, putting this to words to the best of my ability, which oddly won't be that difficult compared to trying to describe, say, LSD or mushroom trips. Exhale. Now I'm expecting something similar to what I just felt earlier, but with a little more zing, so to speak. God, I was wrong. So very wrong. Time freezes and I realise something very big is about to happen. Very big. Oh no, I thought to myself. Too much? Oh, I knew it, this was it. Titanic was about to hit the iceberg. My perception of sound went to flat silence, and all I heard or sensed was this massive machine approaching from far, far away. And by massive, I mean Unicron planet-devouring massive. Just being aware of it, so big, felt like it sucked all the air out of the room. The vacuum created on a beach before a tsunami. A low rumbling was felt. It rumbled with the force of a great machine that I could feel shaking me. The shaking felt physically real. It approached from the distance, making whirring and whizzing noises here and there. It was so big. I could feel this machine was sweeping a route like a Zamboni or lawnmower. It got extremely close, then whirred off along its path into the great distance, then coming back in a swelling ferocity. To and fro it went. Luckily, I was a little prepped for this from reading some great stories of salvia experiences, and I realised that I was about to be shredded up once the machine made its pass over me. But still, reading about it simply cannot prepare you. I waited, somewhat afraid now, only frightened at how truly serious and big this actually felt. What was it going to do to me? This machine was mowing the lawn around my mind, and it would soon mow over my entire mind. Everything in front of me, in my physical space, began to push towards me. Clutter up like an invisible hand was mashing my room into me. I stared at one spot on my wall by a speaker and a can of beer sitting on top of it, and just waited for it. I felt this machine shredding right past me. I was afraid to look anywhere else, and just waited for it to hit me. Then my turn came. It unzipped the seams of my reality. I saw the cracks open up in the walls and little faces peering back from behind the scenes. The can of beer and speaker became an intersect of where this machine had sliced through, and reality peeled back from floor to ceiling. It was like a knife tearing open a curtain. There were cuts and slashes all over my walls. It was so vivid. Just like seeing a knife tearing through a curtain, but with more fluidity than clothiness. The beer can had a face now like a cartoon. It was alive. All the objects and anything near these torn edges had faces and life to it. Little cartoon characters of sorts. I literally saw the fabric of reality rip open and the borders around and in it come to life. And when I looked into the other side, it was almost like, oops, you weren't supposed to see that. No data written here yet. I wasn't sure, but looking into or out of my room, I saw these puppeteers holding my room together. Chameleon-like, camouflage ninja people posed and stretched out on all sides of the walls and corners, holding it together in disguise, a bit like they were supporting a front or a hoax. When I noticed them, they shapeshifted and acrobated themselves elsewhere, and the room just disappeared. This was a very brief and bizarre moment, and I had no sense of inside or outside. Was I looking in at this, or was I looking out? It seemed like I was seeing the universe's safeguard of experiencing technical difficulties. Be back with you shortly, while the rest of the program had loaded up. Looking back at this specific part though, I think I was just experiencing a space beyond my 3 dimensions, and couldn't quite come to terms with what it was. I was witnessing the architects of these constructs move about, a bit like I was backstage watching the acts play out. The shredding continued, or so I thought, but then it was just gone suddenly. I was expecting it to get stronger and more intense, but it leveled off and faded out peacefully. Going back a sec, it's important to note, during this shredding phenomena, I could feel a very unique but distinct burning sensation on all the edges this machine was cutting, like open wounds. It felt like a fire to me, but not painful, just a fiery feeling in evenly cut folds. Then I realized that was it. I'm in Salvia world now, all in. It wasn't that bad after all. It was just that serious impending onset of something huge about to happen that took me aback. But once I was there, I felt okay. I also felt taxed, like I'd reached the top of a mountain after a strenuous climb. I lay at the peak, exhausted and overwhelmed. I can't really describe much of the rest. I just saw all of these fantastic inner workings of the nature of reality, all the little souls and people that work all the magic like a circus act. These creatures were very clown-like, nimble, cartwheeling and flipping and flowing here and there. I couldn't quite keep up. They seemed shadowy and elusive. I got a glimpse of all this, and then the high receded. The entire time I just kept saying, wow, oh my god, to myself over and over. I had no idea. Wow, I didn't know it could be this big. At this point, I was just in too much awe to try to make sense of anything. I was just happy to know I got through it all. I called this strong force a machine, mainly because of the sounds and vibrations I was getting from it. It was like a hedge clipper or buzzsaw. It had some very calculated and mechanized notions to it. But at the same time, it was just simply a huge surging force of energy. It was a very defining threshold between realities. One would have to actually experience it to understand how truly massive it feels. It also seemed finite though. I could sense its largeness, which meant it had a size, right? Well, maybe for another time. I know a lot of higher level trips describe being shot out or blasted out into space, whatever decorative words you choose. But for me personally, it felt like it all came to me. I didn't go anywhere. I was here the whole time. But the rest of it blasted into me, or my space I know as reality. Truly one of the most amazing experiences in my life so far. I think this guy was extremely lucky that his mixture of Salvia and 25I, 2 highly potent substances, didn't result in a nightmarish train wreck or trip disaster like we see with many of these combinations of the more extreme chemicals. It must be said, if you don't know, that 25I-NBOMe can actually be fatal at heavy doses being from like 700 micrograms to 1,000. Yeah, anecdotal reports suggest that this substance may be difficult to use safely due to its highly sensitive dose response and unpredictable effects. And when you're mixing that with salvia, which also has some highly unpredictable effects, the combination of these two substances is going to catalyze a greater potential for a difficult train wreck type of experience. This guy, the thing is, you've got to consider the relative nature of every person who writes a trip report. We don't know what this guy's experience is like. We don't know what his like level of consciousness like, his ego density, how much personal development he's done, how many psychedelics he's done. Everyone's wired up very differently. Some people can mix 25I and salvia and do it consciously and wisely and have these radically insightful forays into altered states of consciousness and really come away from it feeling like it was an amazing thing. But on a general level, I would never ever recommend anyone mix these two substances. It's just not worth it, I don't believe. There's only going to be a very, very small fraction of psychonauts that are able to use these two in conjunction in a constructive manner. I think for most people who mix these, the radical things you would experience consciously would probably not only leave your jaw on the floor, they would leave you crying in a corner, begging for your human level sober sanity to come back. It really is playing with fire when you mix substances. Obviously, it must be said that you can't deny the fact that some people can use them wisely and can use them in a positive fashion. But for most people, yeah, they are just going to mix them together, especially if you go into it with a level of hubris. I've said this many times where it's like, oh, I've done all these substances before and I've taken salvia individually and 25I individually and had great times and had these deep insights into the nature of the universe, fabric of reality. Oh, if I mix them together, I might get an even more amplified understanding of what's going on. But you must acknowledge that you're fueling the potential negative response, whereas like, yeah, there's always going to be a potential negative reaction to either of these substances because they're so unpredictable. And combining two unpredictable substances together, I think it's a no-brainer to say that you are doubling the chances of having quite a disturbing experience. But then again, I must also admit that it's also very relative. I've used 25I before. I've never actually had a negative experience with it. I think the first time I ever took it, it was the first time I'd ever taken a tab. I've talked about it before on the channel. I'll try and link the video. I think I've talked about it before. I think it was my very first time taking LSD or very first time taking a psychedelic. And I was sold a tab that was sold to me as LSD. But I'd done so much research. The minute I took the tab, I realised that it wasn't actually LSD because not only did it have a distinctly bitter taste, it actually made my tongue numb. And that's the major distinction between 25I and LSD. As soon as you put it on your tongue, you can literally feel that it's a different substance altogether. And I had quite not a difficult experience, but when I realised what I'd done, because I'd left it on my tongue thinking, oh, right, is this just first time ever taking a tab, so just like, oh, is this LSD, just sort of bitter tasting? And then I looked it up and I was like, why is my tab bitter and having a numbing effect? And I knew in the back of my head it was 25I, but because I was so excited to take LSD, I just was like, oh, right, whatever, what's the worst that can happen? Then when I read that it was NBOMe, and obviously I read all these like forum posts on like Blue Light saying, oh, you should be concerned if you've just taken that tab, spit it out immediately. And then I was like, how bad can it really be? Which isn't the greatest mindset for it, but thankfully I was lucky that whilst I was tripping serious balls, I actually came away from it being fascinated by psychedelics, and it was probably my very first classical psychedelic state that I experienced. So it really was like my gateway into this whole world. But I wouldn't recommend anyone to start off with 25I at all. And if you do notice that your tongue's going numb and that the blotter is really bitter, I would just spit it. It's not worth it. I'm just telling you what happened from my own experience as a a foolish teenager. This is why I talk about teenagers so much using psychedelics, because I know that if I could go back to the past, I'd give myself a metaphysical hyper slap and be like, no, just be patient and get your life in order before you start getting on psychedelics. Yeah, I remember as well. There was again an unpredictable trajectory to the trip where like the come up and the peak was amazing up until the point where like I started coming down, but I was still trippy as fuck, and I had to just go and like lie in the fetal position upstairs, and then it really started like wigging me out. Wigging me out means basically, I don't know, going paranoid. It's just something we say, I guess, in England, or maybe just round here. Or maybe I've invented it, I have no idea. But yeah, I started wigging out, and I was like, I need to go to the upstairs bedroom in my mate's house. It was a party as well, which is not a great setting, and I had to just go and lie down. And then it was wigging me out that people kept coming upstairs and asking how I was, because then that made me think that I was worse than I was. All I need to do is just lie down and just get away from the intense levels of socialization, because sometimes overstimulation on psychedelics is just far too much, and it can really skew your trip towards a negative one. At least I've found. Gets to a point with me when I'm on psychedelics where I really just do need my own solitude and to bask in the experience, and sometimes I just pick up on too many energies when I'm on psychedelics, and especially since it was the first time taking a proper psychedelic, I didn't realize just how sensitive I actually am to like the energy or aura of the room and people's individual sort of like consciousness and ego, and I was tapping into it so much. It's the first time I ever tapped into like people's psychologies by looking at them and dialing into their minds, and it was just overwhelming to realize that my consciousness could tap into this ability. So yeah, anyway, moral of the story is, whilst a combination of extreme substances like these can produce some glowing experiences and tap you into the mystical nature of consciousness, I really do think you should err on the side of caution with both of these substances, especially 25I, considering it can literally be fatal, and it's not worth losing your life or harming your body over the desire to experience something beyond the human. You really do need to respect your body, mind, and soul to really carve out a pure, constructive, psychonautic, spiritual quest for yourself. So yeah, thought this was quite an interesting one. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Don't forget to support me on Patreon, like the video, subscribe. Yes, I'm starting to do that now. I really have given into the YouTube overlords. I mean, I guess it was just worth saying. But if you already do support me in that way, thank you very much. And regardless of if you don't, I just hope that these videos resonate with you on a level and educate you and maybe even inspire you in some way. Anyway, guys, much love, and I'll see you on the other side.